by chance. ILLUMINOR SZERAS captures a Colexis assassin during a surprise incursion against a chaos-held world. SZERAS, fascinated by his subject and hungry for further specimens, ensures word reaches the Imperium of the event. The High Lords of Terror do not disappoint and dispatch an execution force to destroy the cryptek. The prototype Pariah stood upon the obsidian platform, its disjointed gaze fixed upon the huge, fluttering form that floated in the air above. It felt, if you could still call it, feeling, a schizophrenic mix of being home again and a vague sense that something wasn't right. Still, it listened intently. That device upon your head is crude, but effective at harnessing your evolved powers, the form said in hissed tones. It will do until we fashion a better one, as is the same with your other remnants. The Pariah's arm muscles twitched, almost as if they knew they were next for replacement. It could feel the lethargic shadow memories circling in the deep recesses of its mind, but nothing came into focus. All was blackness and obedience. Make your way to join the Necron tier to the north, the Catan continued. I will find you among them when it is time for your final transformation into the first of many exceptional servants. Now, Necron Pariahs were meant to have been overwritten and revised long ago, yet curiously today a refreshed but established Necron character, ILLUMINOR SZERAS, returns to the fray. The more interesting part is that this announcement is framed within the Psychic Awakening, the ongoing narrative of the unfolding 42nd millennium, most of all for the Necron faction, and this being titled as Pariah. Now, I want to be clear, it has not been specifically announced that Necron Pariahs are returning, and we will look momentarily at what Pariahs are. However, given the nature of 40k, and as I have been repeatedly trying to explain to people that just because something has been revised once does not mean it cannot then return, because whether you like it or not, that's just how 40k works. One might even say 40k don't care about your feelings. Now also, Pariahs are often said to have not been referenced since 3rd edition, and we've talked about that as well. But it's not true, they've also been referenced in 7th edition, which is pretty recent, with a potential origin related specifically, yes, to ILLUMINOR SZERAS. It's a very short reference, but this was basically Games Workshop keeping their Pariah foot in the door. And look, despite me bringing this up in the past few videos, it's not something I want to keep hammering on about. But in this specific instance, I'm kind of forced to because it's specifically relevant. It seems fair to make the logical assumption that Games Workshop, who are returning SZERAS under the huge banner of Pariah, which is also accompanied in their community post by further wording which describes, and I quote, SZERAS has been upgraded with some nifty new abilities, including one that works against psychers. So he's obviously got some kind of nullifying abilities going on there, and again, that can be related to what's coming out of that 7th edition quote and how they've kind of moved this on. So if that isn't all a heavy implication for Pariahs returning, then honestly what is? And if not, it can only be seen as referencing the fact that the Necron perceive SZERAS as something as a pariah in the more literal definition of the word. However, if that's the case, they're trolling the community pretty hard. Now, for those of you who don't know what Necron Pariahs are, they're basically Necrons created from human blanks, rendering them as weapons against psychers. And blanks and nulls, those are the rare humans that are used within Psi Titans, Sisters of Silence, and so on. And I'll explain all this more in a moment. However, my initial starting point here is that yet again, I wish people could just be a little bit more open-minded because, as I've said, the lore of 40k being all neat and tidy and set would be all well and good from one point of view, but it just isn't like that. And in fact, I've seen many people even saying recently that this is something that they love about 40k now that I've been talking about it. It's something that they actually really enjoy. I actually have to personally agree. I like the chaotic nature, and I like the fact that there's different things going on and you can interpret and discuss and all this kind of stuff. This kind of fluidity is not something that I actually enjoy in other verses, which is kind of a contradiction. Now in 40k they constantly change things, details switch back and forth, even authors have said that they've included things to be deliberately misleading or, uncertain at times. I also do think that this is preferential to the kind of more standard changes that happen in verses, because often that happens in a totally breakneck, unexpected way where you think you know where you are and then suddenly bang, it snaps you out of nowhere. But at least with 40k you kind of understand, okay, this is part of how things are and that sometimes things are going to change because that's the nature of the existence and the confused, clouded, ignorant world of the dark far future. So with that said, let's now look at the Pariahs and SZERAS. So it is my estimation that Pariahs are now set to return to 40k. If not, it's a very strange choice to frame the Necron narrative that way, but we'll find out soon enough. And what the hell are Necron Pariahs, you might ask? Well, Necron Pariahs have always been something of a controversial figure because they blend human and Necron, and even more than that, the history of them goes further back in time, because the Pariah gene is what human blanks are supposed to hold that enables them to be blanks. That is, that they have no presence in the warp, and are painful and nullifying to all psychic entities, be they Eldar, human or warp-based. Where the controversy comes in though, is that it is speculated by some in the Mechanicus that the Pariah gene was deliberately engineered into the genomes of the ancient ancestors of mankind by the Necron, many millions of years ago during the War in Heaven, because the Necron could foresee that such a thing would be necessary for them. And this does sit in line with the Necrons having no real concerns about time. Their long-term goals were either to allow the galaxy to refresh so the C'tan could feed upon it again, or to just allow the galaxy to burn itself out, essentially a passive war of attrition, and that they would then rise with little if anything to fight about, able to hold total dominion over the galaxy again. Either way, the Necron are no strangers to playing the long game, and the Pariahs were certainly that. It would take though quite a vision for them to have constructed such an elaborate plan. And this is why it's kind of controversial, because it seems somewhat unbelievable. Some don't even believe that the Pariah gene exists at all in the first place. This is not the only possibility for the origins of Necron Pariah, and we'll come to that in a moment. Necron Pariahs themselves are experimental warriors born out of a blending twixt human and Necron. This kind of abhorrent twisting between races is perhaps one reason why they have disappeared from reference. However, they are also just extremely rare. Blanks themselves are rare already, so Necron Pariahs even more so, which also gives rise to questioning if it was a long-term plan by the Necron to implant some genetic technology. It seems not to be something that would yield huge results successfully. Necron Pariah are captured human blanks who have then undergone the ancient Necron biotransference process that originally turned them into Necron from the Necron tier. So, for the Pariahs, their sentience is now housed within a new cybernetic body forged from the living metal called a necrodermis by the Necron. Their minds are soon enslaved to the will of the Necron, much like the more common Necron warrior, as their new bodies drain their abilities to feel any emotion or pleasure. The significant difference between the Pariah and Necron is that they lack the regenerative ability of true Necron due to their human origin, and still retain something of their fleshy human organs which are encased within their necrodermis shell, thus making them more vulnerable to weapons fire than their quasi-immortal standard forces. This is countered by their sheer power of being a Necron Pariah. They continuously radiate an unnatural aura, and as a result of their null nature, they have a terrifying effect upon their enemies, even those who are not Psykers, because nulls in general will make even non-Psykers feel uncomfortable, especially within humanity, but most especially for Psykers, who can become entirely incapacitated by their presence alone. No psychic abilities are reported as having ever had any effect upon a Necron Pariah, but regardless, they remain something of a controversial class for the Necron, and their origins even more so. ILLUMINOR SZERAS is a truly hated entity within the galaxy, and he also gives weight to the idea that Pariahs will be returning to 40k. Even if they do not, however, let's look at what he is all about. Now, SZERAS as a figure within the Necron was largely responsible for enabling the process of biotransference. This is where the Necron tier were essentially slaughtered en masse and condemned their entire civilization to an emotionless eternal state of what you would describe as undeath. The Necron do not truly live, nor can they truly die. This already happened when their souls were torn from their mortal frames and then consumed by the star god, the C'tan. SZERAS is an extremely dangerous figure because he is still obsessed, even in the 41st millennium, with ascending to a state of being on par with the mighty C'tan. This is something one might assume to be unachievable, but remembering the ancient promises made to the Necron in the very earliest days of the galaxy, comparatively speaking to the current time now, SZERAS still believes this to be possible. He also holds far more knowledge than many of his Necron leader counterparts, and it would be fair to say that he is something of an equivalent to Fabius Bile or Belisarius Cawl. He is something of a scientist and experimenter. He will not be constrained by anything other than his imagination and ultimate goals, and no sacrifice will be too big or small to achieve such things. While the C'tan gifted the knowledge necessary to transfer the Necron tier to Necron, SZERAS was the one who made this their reality. Unlike the other Necron though, and maybe even the C'tan themselves, SZERAS believed this to be the beginning, not the end, for the changes that lay before the Necron tier race, and that this was just a mere first step. He sees them ultimately ascending to a state of pure energy, not dissimilarly to the C'tan. Like all seekers of dark knowledge though, there are some things that remain out of reach. He strives to understand the secrets of life and the universe to enable him to not only ascend to a godlike status, but act as one too, because what kind of god could he be without the power to create and destroy at a godlike level? While these are his primary goals, to understand the nature of the soul, life, death, and how he can master such things, he is also a powerful tech and will regularly make use of living creatures, dissecting them while living and observing their individual organs and structures and making best use of them to enhance Necron technology. And this could be things like improving targeting systems or enhanced armor, and he will use any Xenos race in order to do this. And while he does consider battle to essentially be a waste of time, he will often lead assaults on their worlds or ships. This is somewhat uncommon for Necron, who tend to avoid the psychically powerful Eldar, but for SZERAS he understands the worth of this. While he may be rejected by Necron overlords, they do simultaneously seek his abilities for those and for the said reasons that they need his expertise to continue expanding development of their Necron dynasties. For those subjects, these living victims that SZERAS manages to hold captive, their existence is likely to be one of harrowing misery. They will live only long enough to endure the blood-stained, shadowed laboratory catacombs of the tomb world of Zantragora. SZERAS understands that truth and knowledge is extracted from those who are still living, and so much machinery exists within his laboratories to keep the subjects alive and aware throughout the processes and their various states of dissection. It's uncommon to administer any kind of numbing agent other than where necessary to observe biological processes without a subject becoming unconscious from agony or excessively violent and struggling in their torment. While his specimens agonize screams of no consequence to SZERAS, perhaps even more disturbing are those who may not feel what is being done to them, unable to see the horror unfolding just below outside of their vision. If only they could observe SZERAS as he impassively negotiates their physiology with precision tools, carving his subjects apart molecule by molecule. Given the creativity and depth of understanding possessed by SZERAS, it's certainly feasible that he could be the orchestrator of such a thing as the pariah gene, should such a thing even really exist. However, other descriptions point to the Necron acquiring knowledge for the pariah Necron in a different way by the means of SZERAS experimenting upon Imperial assassins of the Colexus, who are notably blanks, and this is described here. Inquisitor Lord Luminex stood upon the bridge of the battleship Dominatus and squinted at the reflected glare of the barren tomb world below. Not so barren, he thought, as he ground his teeth. An ancient gamble hinged on this day. Shortly after the Horus Heresy, Magos biologists had stumbled upon signs that the genes of the Colexus assassins had been tampered with eons ago. Rather than purge them though, a sect within the Inquisition decided to let the Colexus altered DNA run its course. Who knew how the Imperium could use these evolving agents in the fight against the heretic and the alien? What secrets could be learned from this mysterious ancient manipulation? One of the Colexus, however, had suddenly fled to this planet as if following a program. Now that's a direct quote from an older narrative in White Dwarf, but as per the opening quote, SZERAS is known to experiment on and be fascinated by the Colexus assassin, and this could be one method by which Pariah Necron are once again able to be returned to the battlefield of the undead cybernetic warriors. So I hope you can see that regardless of which viewpoint and how you come to be, there is definitely some foundation to understand that SZERAS has a specific and direct link to Necron Pariah, and therefore this is why I believe they will be returning. We will undoubtedly though learn soon enough if the Necron Pariah will truly return to the fray, but SZERAS himself is certainly back with a vengeance. What will this mean for the unfolding developments of the galaxy in the 42nd millennium? Well, with chaos encroaching into the galaxy and much talk of blackstone harvesting Necron pylons, things are getting very interesting. And I know I need to cover the Psychic Awakening. This is on my radar to come along and address soon enough. In the meanwhile, I have something else coming up for you guys next week. So until then, I'll say as always, thank you very much indeed for watching. Thanks for the support. And if you enjoyed this video, please drop a like. I'll see you guys in the next one.